The world tilted on its axis, not with a seismic shift, but with the quiet, devastating ping of an email notification. I found someone worth my time. 6 words. A declaration, cold and razor-sharp, slicing through the mundane hum of my home office. My name is Miles Hartley, and at 44, I considered myself a man who built things to last: structures, reputations, a life. As a commercial architect in Savannah, Georgia, I prided myself on meticulous planning and strong foundations. Yet, here I sat, staring at a screen that had just reduced my 12-year marriage to rubble. The sender was Kendra, my wife, supposedly indulging in sun salutations and green juice at a yoga retreat somewhere in the Arizona desert. The timestamp confirmed it. 11:22 p.m. her time, late, too late for anything but a premeditated strike. The next line twisted the knife. I've moved your inheritance into my personal account. It's better this way. Better for whom? I wondered, a bitter taste rising in my mouth. Attached was a photo, blurry as if hastily taken or deliberately obscured, yet clear enough to deliver its brutal message. Kendra, radiant and unburdened, her arm linked with some bearded man I didn't recognize. They stood on a balcony, perhaps overlooking a sun-drenched canyon, sunset painting the sky behind them in hues of fiery orange and soft rose. 2 glasses of wine, half empty, caught the fading light, and her smile. It was a smile I hadn't seen in years, wide, genuine, unforced. It was different from the polite, distant smiles she'd offered me across dinner tables or during forced family gatherings. This smile belonged to a woman truly content, a woman shedding the weight of a life she no longer desired. It hit me then, a cold wave of realization. She wasn't just leaving, she had already left, long before this digital dispatch. I closed the laptop with a quiet click, the sound surprisingly loud in the sudden silence of the room. My chest felt tight, not with grief, but with a strange, almost clinical emptiness. I rose from my ergonomic chair, the familiar leather cool against my skin, and walked to the kitchen. The house, our craftsman on Victory Drive, usually buzzed with a low current of shared life, even when empty. Now, it felt like a museum, perfectly arranged yet devoid of its soul. Each carefully chosen piece of furniture, every framed piece of art, seemed to mock the pretense of our shared existence. I poured a glass of water, the cool liquid a small comfort, against the dryness in my throat. My gaze drifted out the window, settling on the backyard. 3 summers ago, we had poured our collective energy into transforming it. I remembered the sun on my back as I meticulously laid each stone for the winding path, my hands calloused but content. Kendra had followed, her laughter echoing as she planted hydrangeas along the edges, vibrant blues, soft purples, bursts of fuchsia. Now, those hydrangeas bloomed in riotous abandon, a testament to growth and beauty. Yet their charm was lost on a home she apparently had no intention of returning to. All that work, all that shared vision, reduced to a backdrop for a digital severance. That money, 5 at 87,000. It wasn't just cash, not a cold number to be tallied and divided. It was Aunt Elaine's legacy. Elaine, who had taken me in when my world imploded at 14, after my parents died in a car accident. Elaine, who had worked double shifts as a nurse at Grady Memorial, her hands raw and tired, to put me through college. She was my anchor, my quiet champion, the one who taught me resilience and the value of a strong foundation, not just in architecture, but in life. She had left everything to me with one simple, powerful note, scrawled on a yellowed legal pad. Build something that lasts. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. I had thought I was building something lasting with Kendra. I pulled out my phone. No missed calls. No frantic texts asking if I'd seen her email. Just the blank screen reflecting my own stunned face. Silence. The kind of silence that spoke volumes, confirming her complete detachment, her seamless transition into a new life, where I was already a ghost. It was as if she'd closed a chapter and simply forgotten to bookmark it. The signs, in retrospect, had been flashing for months, growing brighter, more insistent. Kendra's yoga retreats had initially been a biannual indulgence, a brief escape. Then they became more frequent. 2 days stretching into 4, then blurring into week-long excursions. Her phone, once an open book, stayed face down on tables, a barrier between us. Passwords changed on shared accounts, subtle shifts that left me locked out of spaces I once navigated freely. Conversations, once meandering and intimate, became clipped, transactional, devoid of emotional resonance. 3 months ago, the inheritance had become a frequent topic. Kendra had started asking odd, probing questions, her gaze distant, almost calculating. Where exactly is the money, Miles? Which accounts is it held in? Don't you think we should diversify where it's held? For security. I'd nodded. Distracted, mumbled something about thinking it over. The casualness of her queries now seemed chillingly deliberate, reconnaissance missions disguised as spousal concern. I reopened the laptop, the screen illuminating my face with a cold blue glow. I read the email again, line by agonizing line. The starkness of it. Not even a "Dear Miles" or a perfunctory greeting. Just the declaration and the theft, stark and unadorned. It was an efficiency I, the architect, could almost admire, if it hadn't been aimed at dismantling my life. I typed 6 words in response, each one carefully chosen to betray nothing, to project an unruffled composure I didn't entirely feel. Thanks for letting me know. Then, with a decisive snap, I closed the laptop, finished the now lukewarm water, and walked to bed. Tomorrow would undoubtedly be a long day, filled with the inevitable unraveling. But as I lay alone in that king-sized bed, its vastness now amplifying my solitude, a strange realization settled over me, a truth that should have bothered me, but profoundly didn't. I slept better. Knowing she wasn't coming home, knowing the pretense was finally over, brought an unexpected, almost liberating peace. The weight of her absence felt lighter than the burden of her presence. What Kendra didn't know, couldn't possibly know, was that my own foundations, though shaken, were not crumbling. I had sensed the fissures in our shared ground months ago, a subtle shifting that had nudged me towards quiet vigilance. The inheritance, Anne Elaine's legacy, had never been where she thought it was, and her brazen, ill-conceived attempt to seize it had just handed me everything I needed to build a new future, this time on a truly lasting foundation. Says 15 years earlier, I'd met Kendra at an industry conference in Charlotte. The air buzzed with ambition and the scent of new possibilities. She was electric, a whirlwind of energy, launching her wellness brand, seeking architects to design her first brick and mortar space. I was 5 years into my career, already wary of the monotonous churn of office buildings and parking structures, hungry for projects with soul, with purpose. We connected instantly, 2 ambitious souls drawn to each other's drive. Our courtship was swift, fueled by shared dreams and late-night brainstorming sessions. We married within 3 years, settling in Savannah where my firm had its headquarters. We bought the Craftsman on Victory Drive, a charming old house with a wrap-around porch. Kendra had fallen in love with at first sight, claiming it was her childhood dream. Children weren't part of her vision. The business is my baby, she'd often say, her eyes alight with entrepreneurial fire. I understood. My buildings were my own creations, born of my vision, nurtured by my precision. For 8 years, our parallel paths worked. I designed structures that shaped the city skyline. She meticulously built her brand of organic products and wellness retreats, growing it from a hopeful startup into a recognizable name. We traveled to exotic locales, hosted dinner parties filled with laughter and sparkling conversation. On paper and in person, we were the picture of a successful, modern couple. We projected an effortless harmony, a sophisticated partnership. Then, the cracks began to appear, subtle at first, like hairline fractures in a grand old building. My Aunt Elaine got sick. Cancer, fast and merciless, descended upon her like a predatory shadow. I took a 6-month partial leave, dedicating myself to her care in Atlanta, spending long, quiet hours in hospital rooms. Kendra visited twice, her discomfort palpable. Hospitals depress me, Miles, she explained, her voice tight, her eyes distant. I didn't push it, accustomed to her singular focus on her own well-being. Looking back, that was perhaps the first clear sign of a fundamental divergence, a chasm of empathy I had chosen to ignore. When Elaine died, she left everything to me. The will was simple, direct. The money surprised me. I'd had no idea she'd invested so carefully, so prudently, over the years, steadily building a quiet fortune. Kendra, too, seemed surprised, but her surprise quickly morphed into an unfamiliar, almost predatory interest in our financial planning. We should put it toward expanding the business, she suggested one night over dinner, her fork idly pushing around a piece of salmon on her plate. Her business, she meant. The unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. I need to think about what Elaine would want, I replied, my voice calm, belying the small, prickling unease that had begun to grow within me. That was the first crack. Small, but undeniably visible. Others followed, widening the fissure. Kendra's research and supplier meetings took her away more frequently, her travel itineraries becoming increasingly opaque. Her phone calls, once a source of light-hearted connection, became shorter, often ending abruptly when I heard indistinct voices in the background and dared to ask who she was with. A casual conversation with our neighbor, Frank, solidified my growing suspicions. Frank, a retired postal worker with a penchant for baking artisanal bread and observing local comings and goings, stopped by one afternoon while Kendra was supposedly at a team retreat in Sedona. Saw someone dropping Kendra off last week, he mentioned, casually handing me a loaf of his wife's sourdough. Late, wasn't it? Thought you were out of town. I had been. A 3-day conference in Boston. I thanked him for the bread, filed away the information, and offered no further questions. My mind, ever the architect, began to gather data points quietly, methodically. Then came the password changes. Banking apps, once seamlessly accessible, suddenly locked me out. Conversations about our shared finances, already strained, ended abruptly whenever I pressed for specific details. One humid Savannah evening, I found her in the backyard, her voice a low murmur on the phone, a laugh escaping her lips, a light, unrestrained sound I hadn't heard directed at me in what felt like an eternity. Just Patricia from the studio, she said, sweeping inside, her eyes avoiding mine. Patricia, who had left the business 8 months earlier to start her own venture. I simply nodded, the pretense of ignorance a heavy shroud, watching as she poured herself more wine, her hand steady, and changed the subject with practiced ease. The foundation of our marriage was cracking beneath us, and only one of us was being honest about the extent of the damage. My silence was not born of ignorance, but observation. The quiet hum of my firm's financial advisor's voice on the phone cut through the simmering unease of my days. 2 weeks before Kendra left for what would prove to be her final retreat, Jerry, a man whose calm demeanor belayed a hawk, like vigilance over his client's assets, called. Miles. He began, his tone carefully neutral. Someone's been trying to access information about your trust accounts. They're using your personal information, but they're not passing the security protocols. My blood ran cold, a wave of confirmation washing over me. Which accounts? I asked, though I already knew the answer before he spoke it. The inheritance funds, he confirmed. They tried using the last 4 digits of your social security number, but they couldn't answer the security questions we have in place. I thanked him, hung up, and sat at my desk for a long time, the implications unfurling in my mind. The pieces were beginning to fit together, forming a disturbingly clear picture. That night, Kendra initiated a seemingly innocent conversation. Miles, she began, not meeting my eyes as she picked at a loose thread on the sofa cushion. It's silly to have so many separate logins and passwords for our accounts. We should consolidate everything, Simplify it. Her voice was soft, persuasive. You're probably right, I said, my voice carefully devoid of inflection, a perfect echo of a man unwary. I'll talk to Jerry about it. It was a lie, of course. A crucial, strategic lie. The next day, instead of calling Jerry, I drove north. To Atlanta, to the stately brick office building, where Rita Wallace held court. Rita had been Aunt Elaine's attorney for 2 decades, a woman of sharp intellect and unflappable calm. In her quiet office, filled with the scent of old leather and polished wood, I laid out my concerns. I presented the facts without emotion, without accusation, just a precise recitation of events. Rita listened, her gaze steady, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she leaned back, a faint smile touching her lips. Your Aunt Miles was wise to suggest the irrevocable trust structure. She understood the importance of protecting a legacy. The money is protected, regardless of what happens in your marriage. Her expression hardened then, her eyes losing their warmth. And if someone tried to move those funds without authorization? Miles, that would be attempted financial fraud, with clear and significant legal consequences. Good, I said, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over me. Then let's document everything. And I want to set up a monitoring system that alerts us to any and all attempts to access, move, or change anything related to the trust. Every single attempt. Rita nodded, already reaching for a notepad. My vigilance had begun long before the email. When I arrived back home, the house was quiet, save for the faint sounds of rustling from our bedroom. Kendra had already packed for her retreat. She emerged, her large duffel bag slung over her shoulder, a smaller carry-on in her hand. She kissed me briefly, a dry, perfunctory brush of lips against my cheek, already distant, already gone. I might extend this one, she said at the door, her eyes looking past me towards the drive. Really dive deep into the practice. I helped her load her bags into her car, watched her drive away, the familiar SUV disappearing down Victory Drive, and then walked back inside. I didn't snoop through her emails, didn't check her texts, didn't call her friends or track her location. That wasn't my style. My methods were more surgical. I simply opened our shared cloud storage, a digital repository where we kept household documents, tax records, and joint projects, in a folder specifically labeled Home Renovation Ideas, a project we'd enthusiastically discussed starting this year. I found what I was looking for. Documents she'd forgotten to move or delete, or perhaps thought I'd never look for in such an innocuous location. Screenshots of my bank accounts, copies of old statements, detailed notes about transfer protocols, and most damning of all, a photo of a whiteboard with figures meticulously scrawled. My inheritance amount precisely $587,000 minus 20%. Beside it, a chilling note, transfer fee explanation. It was all there. She'd been planning this for months, a calculated, methodical extraction, a professional operation to dismantle our shared financial life, and, by extension, our marriage. I closed the folder, the click echoing in the silent house. I walked slowly through our home, past the carefully chosen furniture, the artwork that told the story of who we pretended to be. A strange, almost liberating calm settled over me. The betrayal wasn't shocking. It was confirmed, yes, but not a revelation. What truly surprised me was my own response. Not rage, not even profound grief, just a startling clarity. For the first time in years, I saw our marriage for what it had truly become, a transaction. A partnership of convenience and image, which she was now unilaterally terminating, because something more profitable had come along. I slept in the guest room that night, the king-sized bed suddenly too large, too full of ghosts. The next morning, before the city had fully woken, I began making calls, quiet, deliberate calls. By the time Kendra's email arrived 5 days later, a digital declaration of war masquerading as a breakup note, I had already set everything in motion. The trap, unknowingly, had been set, as after receiving Kendra's incendiary email, I allowed precisely 24 hours to pass. No emotional outburst. No desperate calls or texts. Just methodical, calibrated steps. First, I contacted Jerry, my financial advisor, and Rita, Aunt Elaine's attorney. I forwarded Kendra's email to both of them, attaching a simple, succinct note, documentation requested. Both confirmed receipt almost immediately. Neither required further explanation. The email, in its stark honesty, was its own damning evidence. Next, I called Thomas Webb. Rita had recommended him months ago, during one of our hypothetical discussions about protecting the inheritance. He was a sharp, no-nonsense divorce attorney with a reputation for meticulous preparation and strategic precision. His secretary scheduled a meeting for that afternoon, her voice betraying no hint of the storm brewing. By noon, my phone buzzed. A text from Kendra. "Did you get my email?" I responded with a single word, "Yes." Minutes later, another text. "That's all you have to say." I didn't answer. The silence was its own form of communication, a void she would soon begin to feel. Instead, I drove downtown to Thomas's office, a modern, minimalist space with panoramic views of the city. Rita joined us via video call, her face composed on the large screen. "The attempted transfer creates a paper trail, Miles," Thomas explained, his voice calm, as he reviewed the documents Rita had sent over. And a very clear one at that. "There are multiple elements here that work profoundly in your favor. The funds were inherited, never commingled with marital assets, and properly maintained within an irrevocable trust structure. Crucially, she has now openly admitted, in writing, to attempting unauthorized access to those funds." "What's next?" I asked, my voice steady, though a cold satisfaction tightened in my chest. "We file for divorce immediately," Thomas stated, leaning forward, his gaze direct, citing financial misconduct. "Georgia isn't a no-fault state when fraud is involved. This gives us leverage, both in the court of law and potentially in the court of public opinion, should it come to that." I signed the paperwork before leaving his office, the pen scratching against the legal forms, sealing the fate of a marriage that had died long ago. At 4:30 p.m., my phone rang. Kendra's name flashed on the screen. I answered. "You're being childish," she declared, her voice tight with irritation. No greeting. No perfunctory. "How are you?" Just the immediate accusation. "This doesn't have to be difficult." "I agree," I said, my voice carefully neutral, a bland canvas onto which she could project her assumptions. "Then let's be adults about this. The money is already moved. Fighting it will just drain more through legal fees." The casual certainty in her tone was almost breathtaking. "Where are you staying?" I asked, changing the subject, throwing her off balance. A pause, a slight intake of breath. "What does that matter?" "Just curious where home is now." Miles, focus. "We need to discuss the financial arrangements. I'm having my lawyer draw up settlement papers. It's better for both of us to keep this clean." "Who's your lawyer?" I asked. "David Lawrence. He's already reviewing everything." I made a mental note of the name. "That's helpful. Thank you. Miles, are you even listening? This doesn't have to be difficult." "You said that already," I replied, my voice still neutral, an emotionless mirror. "I appreciate your concern for making this easy." Another pause, this one longer, and I could almost hear her relax on the other end, misinterpreting my calm as resignation. "It's for the best," she said, her tone softening, a practiced empathy seeping in. "We've been moving in different directions for years. This is cleaner than dragging it out." "You're right." I agreed. "Cleaner is better." After we hung up, I immediately called Thomas back and gave him David Lawrence's information. Then, I sent a single text to Kendra, a final act of controlled indifference, taking some time to process. "We'll reach out when I'm ready to discuss details." Her response came immediately, almost a reflex. "Don't wait too long. Papers will be ready by Friday. 3 days away, perfect timing." At 6 p.m., Rita called. Her voice, usually composed, carried a hint of professional satisfaction. The trust company has recorded 3 separate attempts to initiate transfers from the trust accounts today, she reported. All properly documented and, of course, blocked. My monitoring system, I thought. And the monitoring system, I prompted, captured everything. Rita confirmed. IP addresses, login attempts, timestamps. The access location matches where the email originated from. Arizona, Scottsdale. Not Sedona as she always claimed. Rita paused, a slight emphasis in her next words. There's more, Miles. The system also flagged suspicious activity from last month. Someone exported account details and transfer protocols while logged in through your home network. We have timestamps and device identifiers. The home renovation ideas folder I realized chillingly precise. I thanked her, hung up, and walked through the empty house. It no longer felt like a home, but rather a crime scene, each room filled with silent evidence of a meticulously planned betrayal. In the kitchen, I opened the bottle of 20-year-old scotch we had been saving for our 15th anniversary, a celebration that would now never happen. I poured 2 fingers into a single glass. Kendra thought she'd set the trap, sprung it with her curt email. She had no idea she had walked right into one herself, a trap of her own making, meticulously laid by a man she vastly underestimated. As the next morning the expected call came. David Lawrence, Kendra's new attorney. His tone was professionally cautious, smooth as river stones. Mr. Hartley, he began, I'm representing your wife in your separation. She's indicated you're amenable to a straightforward settlement. Is that what she said? I countered, letting a hint of mild surprise seep into my voice. A slight hesitation on his end. She mentioned you understood the situation. Which situation would that be, specifically? Another pause. He cleared his throat. A division of assets, including recent inheritance funds. Has she shown you documentation of these funds? I pressed, my voice still neutral, allowing him to dig his own grave. She's provided statements, he said carefully, the caution now more pronounced. Recent ones. From approximately 3 months ago, I made a mental note. The precise window when the attempts began, and transfer confirmations. She's indicated those are forthcoming from the bank. I see. My voice remained flat, devoid of emotion. As she also mentioned the structure of the inheritance. The irrevocable trust established by my late aunt, the legal impossibility of what she's claiming to have done. Silence. A long, profound silence stretched across the line. Monsieur Lawrence, I continued, my voice gaining a touch of steel. I suggest you verify the information you've been given before proceeding. My attorney will send relevant documentation to your office today. I hung up, the small victory a bitter satisfaction. After the call, I drove directly to Brightstone Bank, the familiar, staid institution where Kendra and I had kept our personal accounts for years. Harold, the branch manager, a man with a perpetually furrowed brow and a penchant for perfectly knotted ties, greeted me warmly. He had handled our mortgage refinancing 2 years earlier and knew our accounts intimately. I need to review recent activity on all joint accounts, I explained, taking a seat in his office. Harold pulled up our information. His initial pleasant demeanor shifted as he scrolled through the screens, his brow furrowing deeper. Mr. Hartley, he began, his voice lowered. There have been significant withdrawals over the past 3 months. How significant? I asked, though I had my suspicions. He turned the monitor toward me. The screen glowed, displaying a stark reality. Regular transfers from our joint account to one I didn't recognize. Small at first, $2,000, then $3,500, escalating steadily. The most recent a hefty $47,000, just 2 weeks ago. This receiving account, I said, pointing to the number on the screen. Is it with Brightstone? Harold checked, his fingers flying across the keyboard. No, it's external. Northern Lakes Credit Union. I'd never heard of it. Can you print the transaction history for the past 6 months? I asked. While waiting for the printouts, my phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. Lawrence requesting urgent meeting. Tone significantly changed. The pieces were falling into place with unsettling speed. By the time I returned to Thomas's office, the picture was crystal clear, sharper than any architectural rendering. The Northern Lakes account had been opened 8 months ago, in Kendra's name only. The address listed was an apartment in Scottsdale, Arizona. The total withdrawals from our joint accounts amounted to $178,000. She's been building a new life for a while, Thomas observed, leaning back in his chair. While still having access to mine, I added, a grim irony in my voice. We were reviewing the final bank records when Thomas's assistant announced that David Lawrence was on the line. Thomas put him on speaker. I've received the trust documentation. Lawrence's voice was tight, strained. My client may have misrepresented certain aspects of the financial situation, including her ability to access or transfer those funds. Thomas asked, his voice calm, almost clinical. That appears to be the case. Lawrence admitted, the defeat in his tone palpable. Given this new information, I believe it would be beneficial for all parties to discuss a revised approach. My client has already filed for divorce, citing financial misconduct, Thomas replied, unyielding. The documentation speaks for itself. After the call ended, Thomas looked at me, a slight smile playing on his lips. Hell, drop her as a client by the end of the day. No legitimate attorney wants to be associated with this kind of deception. What about the money she actually did take from the joint accounts? I asked, my voice flat. We'll include it in the filing, Thomas confirmed. We document everything. Let her explain to a judge why she established a hidden residence and systematically drained marital assets while you were building a life together. I nodded, feeling strangely hollow. The betrayal went deeper than I had initially imagined. This wasn't impulsive, a moment of weakness. It was calculated, meticulously planned over months, a hidden agenda pursued while she slept beside me, ate across from me, and made plans with me for a future she had no intention of sharing. There's one more thing, I said, breaking the silence. I need to know who he is. Not for confrontation, not even for the divorce proceedings. I just need to understand the full scope of what I'd missed while building what I thought was a life together. Thomas nodded. I'll have someone look into it. The desire for understanding was a deeper wound than any financial loss. S6 that evening, as twilight settled over Savannah, painting the sky in soft shades of lavender and bruised purple, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a courier, a young man in a crisp uniform, holding a flat, legal-sized envelope. Delivery for Miles Hartley, he stated, his voice clipped and professional. Inside, nestled among a few sheets of formal letterhead, was a letter from David Lawrence, formally withdrawing as Kendra's legal representation, with copies sent to both Kendra and the court. Attached was a small, handwritten note from Thomas. First domino. My phone lit up minutes later, Kendra's name flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, listening to her increasingly agitated messages. She called 3 more times, each attempt more frantic than the last, before sending a text. What the hell did you do? I didn't respond. The silence was my weapon now, precise and devastating. While eating a solitary sandwich at the kitchen counter, an email arrived from Rita, with a subject line that simply read, Update. The trust company, she informed me, had completed their investigation into the access attempts. They had documented multiple unauthorized attempts over 3 months, all captured in detailed logs, complete with precise IP addresses and timestamps. The full report was attached, along with a confirmation that they had referred the matter to their legal department for potential criminal investigation. No action required from you at this time, Rita wrote, her tone coolly professional. But be aware, this path is now open. I forwarded everything to Thomas. The net was tightening. Just after 9 p.m., another text from Kendra. We need to talk. Now. My reply was immediate and unwavering. Through your new attorney when you have one. You've completely overreacted. I was angry when I sent that email. I didn't actually move anything. Her desperation was palpable, a frantic attempt to backtrack. That's not what the access logs show. I texted back, letting the words hang in the digital space. A long, agonizing pause before her next message. What access logs? Instead of answering, I sent one question, a single, pointed query designed to cut through her self-serving narrative. Who is he? 20 minutes passed. The silence stretched, pregnant with unspoken truths. Finally, her reply, this isn't about him. Name. Another long pause. Jason. But he's not important. Last name. Berkeley. He's just a friend who's helping me through this. You're focusing on the wrong thing. I didn't respond further. Instead, I searched the name. Jason Berkeley. Found him quickly. He taught at a yoga studio in Scottsdale, Arizona. His LinkedIn profile revealed he was a former investment broker who had left the financial sector 3 years ago to pursue more meaningful connections. The irony was not lost on me. The next morning, I met with Frank, our neighbor, on his wraparound porch, the scent of his wife's freshly baked muffins hanging in the humid air. The guy you saw dropping Kendra off. I began, my voice low and steady. Would you recognize him again? Frank nodded slowly, chewing on a piece of muffin. Tall guy, beard, drives a gray Tesla. I pulled out my phone and showed him the blurry photo from Kendra's email. This him. He squinted at the image, then nodded decisively. Yeah, that's the guy. He was here maybe 5, 6 times while you were traveling. Always late, always after dark. I thanked him, then asked if he'd be willing to provide a formal statement. He agreed without hesitation, his kind eyes filled with sympathy. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Later at 11 a.m. Thomas called. His voice, usually composed, carried a hint of exasperation. We've got a complication, Miles. Kendra's hired Philip Barnes. My jaw tightened. Barnes. A name that struck fear into the hearts of opposing counsel. Barnes had a formidable reputation for aggressive, scorched, earth divorce litigation. Expensive, ruthless, but undeniably effective. He's requested an emergency hearing to contest the financial misconduct claim. Thomas continued, his voice tight. Says his client has evidence all financial decisions were discussed and agreed upon. When's the hearing? I asked, my mind already sifting through possibilities, forming a counter-strategy. Monday morning. 3 days away. I thought about the hidden apartment in Scottsdale, the shadowy Northern Lakes account, the man named Jason Berkeley who'd been in my house, laughing with my wife while I was away. A cold resolve settled over me. Let's give Barnes something to think about, I said. That afternoon, Thomas delivered a package to Barnes's immaculate, high-rise office. It wasn't just a few documents. It was a carefully compiled dossier, a meticulously constructed case. Copies of everything. The trust access logs, detailing every unauthorized attempt to breach the inheritance, the bank records, chronicling the systematic withdrawals from our joint accounts, charting Kendra's secret financial life, the lease for the apartment in Scottsdale, Frank's notarized statement about Jason's repeated visits to our home, and, perhaps most damningly, the screenshots from Kendra's home renovation ideas cloud folder, showing her precise notes on how to access my accounts, how to bypass the very security protocols she'd tried to circumvent. By 5 p.m., Thomas received a call from Barnes. The aggressive litigator, now stripped of his bluster, requested an urgent meeting to discuss settlement options. He's seen enough. Thomas told me afterward, a note of quiet triumph in his voice. Barnes, now in full retreat, offered a clean split. She keeps what she already took, makes no further claims. You keep everything else, including the house and full inheritance. Counter, I said, without hesitation. She returns half of what she took from the joint accounts and signs a non-disclosure agreement. I don't pursue the fraud angle. The criminal investigation. Thomas raised an eyebrow. You could get more, Miles. Much more. I don't want more, I replied, my voice firm, resolute. I want done. Done with the lies, done with the pretense, done with the corrosive bitterness. This wasn't about revenge. It was about rebuilding, about restoring order. The morning of what would have been our emergency hearing, Kendra and her new attorney arrived at the courthouse. There was no Barnes, no judge, no public spectacle. Just Thomas, waiting with a settlement agreement already prepared, meticulously typed and bound. I waited in the consultation room, a glass wall separating me from the corridor, allowing me to observe without engaging. Through the glass, I saw Kendra's face as Thomas handed over the evidence file, the thick stack of photographs, statements, account logs. Her expression shifted with breathtaking speed, from initial defiance to shock, then to something akin to utter defeat. Her eyes flickered toward the room where I sat, then quickly looked away, unable to meet my gaze. Barnes, surprisingly subdued, leaned close to whisper in her ear, his gestures indicating the overwhelming weight of the evidence. She nodded slowly, a silent capitulation. 10 minutes later they entered the room. My client accepts the terms, Barnes stated formally, his voice devoid of its usual bluster. Thomas slid the agreement across the table. Kendra, her handwriting shaky but surprisingly determined, signed without reading it, as if to delay the inevitable acknowledgement of her ruin. I signed my portion, then slid a separate, smaller envelope across the table to her. "What's this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The first words she had spoken to me since the phone call days before. "The passwords," I said, meeting her eyes directly. "To the cloud storage, the house alarm, everything else you might need to get whatever you left behind." Her eyes finally met mine, searching, not for anger, not for triumph, but for something she couldn't define. She found neither. In that moment, she looked more lost, more utterly adrift, than I had ever seen her. "It was never about the money," I said quietly, the words a gentle exhale. "That would have been simpler." Barnes touched her elbow, a quiet gesture, guiding her to stand. She clutched the envelope to her chest as they left, her gaze fixed forward, never looking back. The finality of it hung in the air, a silence more profound than any spoken farewell. Axis 6 months later. I sold the house on Victory Drive. The wraparound porch, the perfectly laid stone path, the riotous hydrangeas, too many empty rooms, too many memories to simply paint over. The new owners, a young family with boisterous twins, loved the porch instantly, their laughter filling the once silent spaces. They saw it as a beginning, which was precisely what I needed it to be. I moved to a loft downtown, a minimalist space of exposed brick and natural light, within walking distance of my firm's office. I bought less furniture, kept fewer things. It was a conscious shedding, a deliberate simplification. The less I owned, the less I had to protect, the more space there was for new beginnings. Rita, ever the pillar of strength and wisdom, helped me restructure Aunt Elaine's inheritance. It became a foundation, dedicated to supporting architectural scholarships for promising young students who, like me, had lost parents too soon. Elaine would have wanted her legacy to build, not just protect. Its first recipient was a brilliant 17-year-old girl from South Georgia, whose essay about designing spaces that heal resonated profoundly with the selection committee. Lane would have loved her miles, Rita said, her eyes bright with pride as we awarded the scholarship. I thought about my aunt often, her practical wisdom, her quiet resilience, her insistence that creating something truly worthwhile required equal parts vision and vigilance. One crisp autumn afternoon, collecting mail in the lobby of my building, I found a plain white envelope. No return address, just my name handwritten on the front. Inside, tucked between 2 blank sheets, was a check for exactly $89,275, the precise amount of half the money Kendra had taken from our joint accounts. Below the number, A brief, stark note scrawled in an unfamiliar hand, the rest of what I owed. Not just the money. No signature. None needed. That evening, I walked down to the riverfront, the check still folded neatly in my pocket. This was where Kendra and I had once talked about opening a joint venture, a wellness space I would design, she would operate. A dream that had died long before our marriage had. I sat on a bench, watching the steady procession of cargo ships glide by, their massive forms moving slowly, but unstoppably towards distant horizons. Tomorrow, I would deposit the check into the foundation account. Another scholarship. Another chance to build something that might truly last, something that transcended the fleeting nature of personal relationships and material possessions. My phone buzzed with a text from Jerry. Dinner still on for 7, bringing that architect I mentioned. She's visiting from out of town. I glanced at my watch, just enough time to walk home, change, and head to the restaurant. Just enough time to decide to say yes to whatever came next. I texted back and stood to face the evening, the city lights beginning to sparkle on the dark river. Sometimes, I realized, the strongest response to betrayal isn't revenge, it's rebuilding. And I was finally ready to build again.